good evening and welcome. You're watching Beyond the Headline with me, Tamanna Inamdar. A very crucial statement was made by External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar in an interview today to news agency ANI. He was asked about the BBC documentary controversy, the BBC documentary which was released late last month. But he made an overarching comment on a battle of narratives that has been going on. He talked about how election season may not have begun in India, but it's definitely begun in London and in New York. The fear of the foreign conspirator has entered the political lexicon of India once again. But it must be taken seriously if it has come from the External Affairs Minister of the country. So today we will examine those comments and try to understand what's really going on. Is there a foreign conspiracy against the current Indian government and Indian democracy, or is this a political strategy? All of that coming up, but first, let me take you through the top stories at this hour. External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar hints at foreign conspiracy, hits out at BBC and Soros, says politics at play. Russian President Vladimir Putin gives wartime address, announces that Moscow is suspending its participation in the last remaining nuclear arms control pact with the United States. Lok Sabha Secretariat allots the Shiv Sena office in Parliament to Eknath Shinde faction. Sources say Shinde camp could take over Shiv Sena funds used in election campaigns and other party-related activities soon. Lyricist Javed Akhtar rebukes Pakistan in Lahore, says 2611 plotters still roaming free in their country. Bone-chilling incident from Hyderabad. Pack of dogs maul a 5-year-old to death in broad daylight. Mayor ignores question on negligence. A glorious chapter of Indian sports comes to an end as ace tennis star Sania Mirza bids farewell to the game. Ends tennis career with first-round exit in Dubai. Evoking foreign conspiracies to attack India is not a new political ploy. But when the External Affairs Minister speaks of a battle of narratives, it's a serious matter. External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar, in a tell-all interview to news agency ANI, spoke of ideologies and political forces inside and outside which are working hand in glove. He talked of a battle of narratives and how those who are in the opposition and can't win elections are working with these forces. Now, the statements have to be seen in the context of three recent events. First, the release of a documentary by the BBC on the 17th of Jan, a two-part documentary. Part 1 was released on the 17th of Jan, that looked at post-Godhra riots in Gujarat and questioned the Prime Minister's role. Then a report by short seller Hindenburg on the 24th of Jan that targeted the Adani Group with accusations of stock manipulation. This issue has quickly turned political and was linked by the opposition to the government and their alleged proximity to the group. On February 16th, billionaire George Soros said the Hindenburg allegations will weaken this government's hold. Now, let's listen in to some of the statements that S. Jaishankar made today in his interview.
Look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, okay? What I'm explaining to you is actually politics at work. Why is it difficult to understand that there are ideologies and political forces outside India very similar to those in India, and the two are working hand in glove. Part of the problem is when political forces in India are not doing so well electorally, they tend to kind of summon up this support system, if you would, or the echo chamber, or call it what you would. Please tell me why suddenly, there's a surge of reports and, attention and and views. I mean, were some of these things not happening earlier? I mean, I gave you the example of Assam.
Yeah.
I mean, people speak about, okay, you had to make a documentary. Many things happened in Delhi in 1984. Why didn't we see a documentary on that? We are debating actually politics, which is being conducted ostensibly as media, as so. There is a phrase, war by other means. There is also, think of it, this is politics by another means. I mean, you'll do a hatchet job. Then you want to do a hatchet job and say, well, this is just another quest for truth which we decided after 20 years to put out at this time. So I mean, come on, you think the timing is accidental?
So is there a bigger conspiracy at play? Is the timing not accidental? And what really is the playbook here? Is this only a political strategy? To speak on this, I'm joined first by Pavan Varma, former diplomat and author. Mr. Varma, thank you so much for speaking with us on Beyond the Headline. You've heard some of what the External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar has said today in that interview, specifically on the role of foreign forces. What do you make of some of these claims?
First of all, let me say that Jaishankar and I have been colleagues in the Foreign Service. He was a year junior to me. And we have been friends for long standing. And in fact, I was in the Standing Committee of Parliament when he was Foreign Secretary, a Standing Committee of Parliament on External Affairs. And I have a very high regard and respect for his intelligence and competence. What I feel about this matter is that, as India emerges as one of the most important countries in the globe, what is happening in India is being watched closely. We are like, in many ways, a fish in a glass bowl. And therefore, there will be commentaries which are either of praise or critical, positive or negative. I think India now, as an emerging superpower, let's face it, we are a country of 1.4 billion people. We are the world's largest democracy. We are the world's fifth largest economy, hopefully to become the third largest economy, moving from a net worth of 3 trillion to 5 trillion in the next few years. We are a large market. We have established institutions. We have an independent judiciary. We have, even though many times curtailed, freedom of the press. In other words, India is not a banana republic. And as we come into prominence on the globe, as we should, given our size and strength and importance, we are a nuclear power. There will be commentaries which are adverse, which are critical, and this is the kind of scrutiny you can't avoid. Now, how we react to them is what makes us truly a mature.
No, but Mr. Varma, the question isn't merely of scrutiny. It is of motive behind the scrutiny, and which is why what the External Affairs Minister has said today is so crucial. He's talking about a larger narrative at play here. Do you think this is a real concern, or is this a political strategy?
No, I say that for a country like India to allege an international conspiracy for every comment or documentary made is puerile, it's immature. It should be ignored because we are capable of looking after our interests. Let me give you an example. Watergate happened in America. It involved the American president, a direct attack on him. The entire media of the world reported on it. Was it a conspiracy against America? Similarly, on a different level, what happens in India, especially because we are a very important emerging power, will be reported upon, commented upon, discussed and debated abroad. And there are people who will write a positive editorial and there are those who will write a negative editorial. I think India should have the gravitas, the balance, the equilibrium, and the maturity to take it in its stride. Have it rebutted at the level of the official spokesman of the MEA, or through a
Right.
PIB release, or through our high commissions and embassies. I don't think we need to react like we used to in the 70s, if you remember the time of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, in particular in the period leading up to the emergency. She would see a foreign conspiracy everywhere, as if India was being targeted. I don't think we are in that position now. And even then I thought, and I was a student then, that it is more for an internal audience and for internal support for her and her party. I don't think India needs to do that now.
No, but the charge over here is not merely of a foreign conspiracy. It is of opposition colluding with such forces because they are not doing well electorally, that they are hand in glove. How do you respond to that?
Now, do you think the opposition will find itself materially helped in finding ground level electoral battles in India by using what happens or is written and largely unread in India or unseen in India by somebody abroad? These are battles which we have learned to deal with internally. If the opposition is weak, it's weak because of its own weaknesses. It refuses to smell the coffee. It works in silence. It does not develop a pan-India narrative. It does not strengthen its organizational strategies. And then to accuse it of being in cahoots with something abroad, after all, when the UPA was in power and the BJP was alleging corruption of mega proportions, do you think the international press was not reporting it? Did it mean that the BJP was in cahoots because it was out of power with some foreign forces working against India? I think these allegations need to be made carefully and with proof, because it is the duty of the opposition to intervene. And in doing so, today, in a globalized world, they can cite what is happening if there are shell companies abroad, for instance, or if some evidence is produced abroad which is relevant to India and is backed up with facts. Does that mean a conspiracy, or does that mean that the opposition is using whatever facts it can marshal at its command in the appropriate manner to confront the government in parliament or outside?
Right.
So I'm a bit careful about buying these great conspiracy theories that, anyone who's critical of the government is part of the international conspiracy in which the opposition is complicit.
Now, so you talked about this sort of, political voice coming out in the 70s as well, in the 80s. Mr. Pavan Varma, do you think it will work with voters of today? And in that case, is it a political move? Because we talked about all of these events happening in quick succession. Is that a message that is going down with voters?
I think people are discriminating. I think they are used to the fact that governments say they are under siege and summon national unity and perhaps appeal to hyper-nationalism as a counter to all criticism, often conflating legitimate dissent with anti-nationalism. People are beginning to see through it, and I don't think any government can do it beyond a point, nor should it. There are issues before the people. The government has to defend itself on those issues, and the opposition, if it is effective and competent, should be able to raise it. This attempt to deflect a legitimate scrutiny, interrogation, question that comes from the fact that we are a democracy and therefore has an opposition and a free press, hopefully, to conflate that with an attack on the government, that I think is something that is not a very democratic thing to do. Let me put it as mildly as I can.
All right. Thank you so much, Pavan Varma, for speaking with us. An attack on the government is not a democratic thing to do, says the former diplomat and author and also former politician. The question, though, is what is the severity of these charges? Tuhin Sinha, spokesperson of the BJP, with me on the show today. Vishnu Prakash, former diplomat, with me as well. I'm speaking with Tehseen Poonawala, political analyst, and Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former diplomat. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm going to start with the former ambassadors on the show today. So, Ambassador Prakash, let me begin with your take, because, you know, when the External Affairs Minister says that there are forces in New York and in London that are already looking at election season, that's a serious charge.
Greetings, Tamanna. No, it's not a serious charge. It's a fact. Why is it that BBC, for example, I mean, I can take any number of other examples. Why is it the BBC, for example, pulls out a document, does a documentary on something which is 20 years old, which nobody is talking about, and you know, presents a one-side point of view, disregarding what the judiciary has said, what the investigations have taken place. Nothing matters. And the timing of that. Now comes George Soros. There is always an effort among some sections. I'm not painting everybody, tarnishing everybody with the same brush, but there is a section of the left liberal media, of the section of intelligentsia. For them, dictatorships are good. For them, fundamental Islamic fundamentalism is good. But Indian democracy is bad. Indian judiciary is bad. Indian government is bad. I mean, there is a jaundiced view of India, and there's an effort to malign India, which is going on and on and on, just because they are of the view that they believe that, you know, we little brown people do not know what is good for us. Maxims like Economist or BBC would tell us whom we should vote for. I mean, this has to stop. I agree. I was listening to.
But Ambassador Prakash, are you saying that the BBC's international editorial team is looking at the timing of when to do a documentary?
Oh, absolutely, they're looking at it.
The nation of India?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not that one fine morning they got up from the right side of the bed and said that let's do that. I mean, the timing. Look at the timing. We have the presidency of the G20 summit. We have the presidency of the SCO summit. We have the economy is taking off. Things are happening, and at that time to come up with a headshot job like this, what is it? It is clearly an effort to deflect attention from India on things which are positive. You tell me, Tamanna, have you ever seen? There's so much happening in India. There's so much happening in India. Have you ever seen a positive story? Because they are looking for out.
But that's not how the media works. Ambassador Prakash, I mean, you are, of course, the expert in your field, and I will get more views on that. But the media does not work looking for positive stories. Yeah, that's never the media's brief.
But I agree with you. I agree with you. Dog biting a man is not a story of man.
Journalists don't start their day by saying that, can we say something good about someone?
No, please don't say anything good about India. Fair enough. But at least base your criticism on facts. You cannot take a one-sided view. You cannot.
Okay. Ambassador Prakash is saying it's definitely a fact that there is a targeted sort of conspiracy. He's talked about the BBC. Ambassador Balakrishnan, how do you look at this and the statements made by the External Affairs Minister today?
Well, I think there is a certain coincidence in the number of events which have happened recently But I think it's premature to reduce from that without hard evidence that there is a conspiracy. I think what is also very clear is that the media management of the government should be much more aggressive and much more sharper. In any case, all these will have no impact on the voters in India, where the voters are extremely smart and they will make their own choice. And this thing will not influence them. At the same time, I must warn that, there are organizations which specialize in election interference. Recently, an Israeli company boasted that they had interfered in elections in more than 30 countries using all kinds of, hacking and ICT tools. So the threat of interference in elections from external actors is something which you have to be vigilant about. Thank you.
All right. So there is, we need to be vigilant about a threat from external actors. Now, Tehseen Poonawalla, where, the waters get muddied, is this an attack on India? Is this a stance taken by what is being described here as left liberal media? And what really is the conspiracy and the role of the opposition? Remember, the External Affairs Minister also says that those who can't win electorally are hand in glove with such forces.
So let's separate the wheat from the shaft. And we have two former diplomats who served our country well. So let's raise this issue. One, if somebody in position of power, like the External Affairs Minister, he sits on the Cabinet Affairs for Security, the highest body of our country, if he says the opposition is involved in anti-national activities, that's what it means. Why aren't they being prosecuted? Now, this is cursor to something the most honorable Prime Minister said in Gujarat. And he said, and I quote him, that a former army chief and a former vice president were involved in a conspiracy with Pakistan to topple his government, which is an elected government. You know what are the consequences of that statement? The late Arun Jaitley had to apologize in Parliament. So either you owe responsibility to all of us as citizens, because we all united as citizens, though we may have a diverse opinion politically. But if somebody is trying to interfere in our country and the External Affairs Minister, who sits on the highest body of our country, has evidence of it, why are they not being prosecuted? Now let's come to the second part and let's talk specifics, because generality is what this government thrives in. So let's talk of specifics. There is a report that talks about a business house. That report, by and large, raises 3 or 4 very important questions. I'm not going to go into details. It says, look, there is an apartment in Abu Dhabi which has 6 shell companies operating from a tax haven. From these 6 shell companies, which have illegal holdings of the company, which have been told to the Security Exchange Board that is being held by foreign investors, is actually controlled by this industrialist brother. As a result of which there is share price rigging, there is insider trading, and there is round tripping of money. All of these are criminal offenses in any democracy. It's been about a month since this report has come out. Why haven't there been a forensic evidence? How difficult is it for one of the most powerful nations in the country, India, to check that flat in Abu Dhabi, check those 6 companies, check the RBI route and say they were shell companies or no? I don't believe we are a banana republic, but nobody's doing it. What is the excuse? This is an attack on India. So you look at everything, the excuse for anything and everything is this is an attack on India. Everything's not an attack on India. Let me give a second example before I end. The respected diplomat Vishnuji spoke about the documentary. This documentary, when it came out, before it was banned, 6 days prior to it was banned, I myself, and I am not left, I'm liberal, but I'm actually right of the center. Just to put that on record, put in various groups that this particular documentary is of no use. It will actually help the current government. It's useless. Everything. Who asked the government to come and try and ban something? What was the use of banning it? Nobody was watching it. You tried to ban something. You tried to come down with a heavy hammer on it. Obviously, in an internet age, nothing can be banned. And then you send tax
Tehseen, that does not. One minute. Tehseen, that does not explain the question of timing of that documentary that the minister is speaking about today. He's talking about the question of timing.
Even if the timing was suited to actually put this government in a dock, as the minister is alleging this is a conspiracy against India, the acts against BBC should be documentary evidence of that given to the government or to the BBC. What was the act of the government?
Where is the evidence?
How is tax helping? How is tax rates helping?
No, but they are saying the tax surveys have nothing to do with the documentary. They're on record saying the tax surveys have nothing to do with the documentary.
Just one line. One line. Fair point. Then why were you checking journalists' phones? So journalists were doing the transfer pricing of the shares.
Tuhin
Journalists were
Sinha,
doing
1 minute. Tuhin Sinha, the question is, where is the proof? Is there evidence of this? Is this a political strategy? And it will not be the first time any government has used this as a political strategy, not just in India, but everywhere. We remember the US election, where the Russian role was looked at very, very carefully before and after the last election. So this has happened before. It is a political strategy as well. But are we seeing a political strategy today in play from the External Affairs Minister, who is also now a politician? Or are we seeing some very serious claims being made about forces acting against this country?
Well, good evening, Tamanna. As you would be aware, apart from a political spokesperson, I'm also an author, and a book I had recently worked on speaks about the global deep state. And India has always been on the radar of global deep state. So let me tell you that my independent research confirms that the global deep state targeting India is a reality. Now, when it comes to the possible or potential or actual collusion of India's opposition with it, where does it emanate from? I will give you a few examples. Rahul Gandhi, along with a few opposition leaders, had traveled to England last summer. Look at the kind of ludicrous comments he had made over there. Number one, around 24th May, he had openly endorsed China's dead diplomacy by saying that China has been offering prosperity to several countries. You know, this was at a time when China had wreaked economic havoc upon the world. Number two, he met Jeremy Corbyn, who has always endorsed Pakistan's stand on Kashmir. And in that same trip, he says in India, kerosene has been split all over, and it is about time when there will be fire. That fire was seen 7 months later. With the BBC documentary, with the Hindenburg report. Now, whether or not there is actual collusion, the behavior of India's opposition has been extremely irresponsible, raising aspersions on their character and raising aspersions on their true nature. So that is where, the suspicion arises from.
Okay, just a quick counter question, Tuhin. Will any opposition not grab whatever chance they have to attack the government in power? Is that not the role and nature of the opposition? So, for example, when there were reports in international press about how the UPA's actions were not working well for the economy, we keep talking about how India was in the Fragile Five, etc. Would the BJP not have gone to town with it? Because your job as opposition is to look at cracks in the armor or chinks in the armor of your political opponent. I'm trying to understand how you would differentiate between the two.
No, the situation is completely different over here. You have an economic terrorist who had who had destroyed Bank of England, George Soros, who openly says that I have set aside a certain amount to restore democracy in India. You have the vice president of one of his funds, the Open Society Fund, walking with Rahul Gandhi during the Bharat Jodo Yatra. So have we ever in the past aligned with a person of such disrepute? We have not. So I don't know where the comparison comes from. And I can give you many other examples. In 2021, there was a report from a We Dem Institute, which downgraded India's democracy and put India at par with Pakistan. Rahul Gandhi was the first to tweet that report. That institute, We Dem Institute, was eventually found to be funded by, again, George Soros's Open Society Fund. During 2007-2008, Rajiv Gandhi Foundation mentioned Human Rights Legal Network as one of its official partners. Human Rights Legal Network was again sponsored by George Soros's fund. So I think, we have never.
So George Soros doesn't like this government. No. So George Soros doesn't like this government. George Soros doesn't like this government.
No, he has no right to like or
and
not
this
like.
Political establishment.
Is a fund to restore democracy when India is the most robust democracy in the world.
Tehseen, is this a collusion? Is this a collusion and a pattern?
I sometimes find it humorous. I didn't like Donald Trump too much. Does that do I become an enemy of America? I mean, how does my opinion count?
No, but did you have a fund to restore democracy in America? The point is making that George Soros has a fund. Just, tweeting,
Well,
I don't like Donald
I'm
Trump
coming to
is
it.
not going to make any difference to him.
Exactly. And therefore, if Mr. Soros, a 90-year-old man with whom the BJP seems to have a problem, and I have no brief for this 90-year-old man. I didn't even know who this man was until a cabinet minister decided to let go of her duties and do a press conference on this man. If the government of India is so shaken by him, they should prosecute it. Wait, they did try to prosecute him. 2016. Who was the Prime Minister? Oh, it was Prime Minister Modi. You know what happened? The matter is still sitting in High Court. They haven't been able to bring a shred of evidence. It comes back to evidence. But let me give you actual evidence. In 2004 and post 2004, we have two wonderful diplomats here. Both have worked very hard for this country. India in 2004, 2006, 2005, 6, 7, 8 got the nuclear deal, the 123 agreement, despite not being a signatory to the NSG. You know who tried to derail the deal with the left loonies? The rowdy right, the BJP. They came in parliament with a bunch of cash. Can anything be more anti-national? But hey, I will not call the BJP that they were against India or they were funded by foreign forces. But I'll tell you one more thing. When my personal friend Hemant Karkare was martyred for this country outside Taj fighting on 26/11, one chief minister was doing a press conference outside Taj while NSG was fighting. I will still not say that the chief minister, Narendra Modi ji, now the prime minister, is anti-national. This habit of saying you're against the country must stop. If you have evidence, you're duty bound by the constitution to prosecute it. You took George Soros to court in 2016, Delhi High Court. You haven't brought a shred of evidence. If he is guilty of interfering in our elections, please prosecute him. You say Mr. Modi is the most powerful man in the universe. Ask him to stop, his government to stop playing victim and to start acting.
Okay. Tuhin, do you want to quickly respond to that before I go to more views?
No, we have made an allegation. Why is the Congress so enamored of George Soros that they cannot even, speak against his intrusion in India's sovereignty? I mean, would any responsible opposition party not condemn the remarks of George Soros, where he openly says that India's democracy has been disrupted? In the past, he has made equally ludicrous charges like the Muslims of India will be disenfranchised. So this man has been spreading canards for a very long time. As far as, Tehseen's charge was where he mentioned that from 2016, we've not been able to prosecute him. Please understand that India is not a banana republic as much as you may want it to believe so. We follow the process of law, but yes, his activities have been severely curtailed in the country, not just his. We have a record of banning all the shady NGOs which were receiving funds from shady external partners. In fact, the FCI...
Important point, shady. What is shady? What is shady? Important point. What is shady? What is definition of shady? Is it no, so see.
Where did the funds, which were the shell companies employed in the case of, the National Herald case, where Rahul Gandhi is out on bail? So the Congress itself has so much clarification. The Congress clarification. On these issues.
One clarification.
Okay, very quickly, Tehseen. Very quickly, Tehseen. Short one.
Actually, I'll have to do two clarifications because one. Actually, the opposition and Mirror now covered it, Times now covered it, your sister channel. The opposition, including Jairam Ramesh, condemned George Soros. This is so far as facts are put in. They've covered it. Please, Tuhin, don't interrupt.
No, he did not condemn.
Tamanna, you may fact check. Please don't interrupt me. Please, I request you. They did condemn it. Point number two, if you cannot guard the sovereignty of this country, please step down. There were attacks on AIMS and the website until the Mirror now did not break the story and actually brought it out. The government was living in La La Land and not even accepting AIMS website was attacked by China. You cannot protect the sovereignty of the country. Don't come around on some mysterious left liberal, some echo chamber, Khan market gang to protect the country.
No, Khan market gang to nahi bola aaj. Khan market gang nahi tha. They're not as important as George Soros. Okay, 1 minute. Ambassador Prakash, I want to understand in real terms this, because you spoke about a whole system of people or entities that are looking at India, targeting India. Is this a recent phenomena? Is this, in your view, have to do with this government and those who are not very happy with this government being in power right now? Or is this something which has been there all along? And how will you differentiate between political moves and actual threats to the sovereignty of a nation?
India is too big to be shaken by such allegations. There are multiple ways
Exactly.
to handle that. I agree that not all allegations or not all the mudslinging should be responded to because you give it a new lease of life. At the same time, you cannot lie prostrate and play dead and allow people to walk all over you. So there has to be a fine balance between the two. Again, narrative is important, and I agree with the panelists, my co-panelists, that we have to do much better in putting across a narrative. But the fact also remains that whenever and this is general, when a country rises, when there is a rising power, there is bound to be opposition. In the 80s, when, for example, when Japanese exports started surging, there was a concerted campaign against Japanese exports. I mean, I can name other countries also where it happened. So yes, one, we will have to deal with uh, opposition. There will be opposition, there will be criticism. But what we have to guard against is not to allow certain forces which have using money power, which have a certain agenda. Now, when you talk of
Who are
this
these?
kind of a
We're
negative,
going on talking about George Soros. Is George Soros that powerful? Is George
well,
Soros, I mean, in the world
he's
of
a
business,
relic.
I'm not sure anyone takes him very seriously anymore.
No,
But is,
he's a relic of the past who believes that
yeah.
it is still 1945. So I mean, I don't will not give more credence than that to George Soros. But the fact also remains that since BJP has come to power, it cannot. No Western media will journalists or media organization will talk about it other than using a prefix Hindu nationalist government. What's a Hindu nationalist government? So there is a certain mindset to paint the government in a certain way, and which cannot be ignored, cannot be which has to be recognized. But at the same time, we have to take criticism in a stride, and wherever there are
Okay.
blemishes, and if some agency has pointed out blemishes or shortcomings, obviously they need to be investigated. There's no question of that.
I think it's important here to make a distinction, and Ambassador Balakrishnan, I'm going to come to you, between criticism and op-eds of media that the government may not like, which are not, singing their praises or are critiquing them, and serious conspiracies to meddle in the democratic institution of this country. Is there really a conspiracy afoot to meddle with the process of democracy in India? And can that actually work? Is that a real threat? I think that's the cogent question out of all of this.
Well, I think at this stage, we don't have enough evidence to conclude that there's been an effort to undermine the whole democratic process in India. But that doesn't rule out the fact that as we approach the elections, external actors will start. After all, India is a major country. Everybody is interested in what's happening in India. And that's a good thing. I mean, we've come up, Rising India, one of the consequences is everywhere across the world, people are interested in what's happening in India. They will analyze, they will comment. That may upset some people, that may please some people. There will be forces who will actually try to pay sections of the media to get their versions out. Now, here is where I think for a lot of investigation should be done. Who paid for the Hindenburg report? Did they do it free, pro bono? Who paid for it? Similarly, who paid for the BBC documentary? Who funded it? I mean, these are all questions which should be investigated. I mean, I'm not making any accusations here, but these things should be brought to light. Now, to say that there is a conspiracy is not going to really be effective strategy to counter this. I think we have to have good media management, facts and evidence-based, and aggressive where it's necessary. At the same time, within the country, I don't think this kind of thing has any impact whatsoever on the average voter. I think they are far more concerned with, how the political parties, my two friends, how they are going to serve their needs. And that is where the discussion should go. What are the political parties going to do for the people in the approach to the elections? We don't hear anything about that. Thank you.
Well, Ambassador, if only politics was so cut and dry. By the way, since there was a whole question about what Jairam Ramesh tweeted, I did pull out that tweet. He says, and I quote, whether the Prime Minister-linked Adani scam sparks a democratic revival in India depends entirely on the Congress, opposition parties and our electoral process. It has nothing to do with George Soros. Our Nehruvian legacy ensures people like Soros cannot determine our electoral outcomes. Toheen, do you think this matters on the hustings? Does it matter to voters? Or does this sort of narrative that they're foreign threat against us, does that matter to voters? How does it play out politically?
Well, I don't think this will cut much ice with the voter. Whether there's a foreign hand or not.
Oh, that question was for Toheen. Ambassador, that question was for Toheen, please. Yes.
If you ask me, the voters are more than happy with what they have witnessed, the transformation that they have witnessed in the last 9 years. In fact, I had just traveled to the interiors of Madhya Pradesh last week, and I was surprised with the kind of roads from Gwalior to Khajuraho, a distance of 275 kilometers was traversed in less than 4 hours. So the people of this country have seen a transformation in these last 9 years, which they had not seen before, and they are more than happy. They are, in fact, habituated to this government. So I think we don't have any worries going ahead. But the point is that if the opposition, either directly or indirectly encourages foreign powers to meddle in our affairs, and now again coming back to Adani, because Jairam Ramesh and the Congress Party believes that the Adani episode has been responsible for kind of destabilizing the democracy. I'm again throwing an open challenge to the Congress Party that at least in the last 3 years, all the businesses that the Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan governments have given to Adani Group, have they even initiated a process to review that? On the one hand, they make such scathing attacks on Adani. Fair enough, you have your right to make an attack. The SEBI is the authorized body to investigate and to carry out its inquiry, which I'm sure they're doing. But if you link democracy with that, if it is such a big issue for you, at least initiate the process of reviewing all the business, all the contracts that your two state governments have been giving out to them in the last 3 years.
Okay. I think at the end of the day, we have to look at how this goes through politically. Is Indian democracy really that fragile that an op-ed, a documentary, a statement is going to make a difference to it? Are we now being watched very closely by the world? And if there are serious threats, well, what are we doing about it? These are some of the key questions that emerge after this discussion. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. I'm going to take a very short break. But on this other side, we talk about what Putin is saying just days before the anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. His message to the West a day after Joe Biden visited Kyiv. All of that coming up.